Hey everybody, I'm Christian Johnson with the CCM Magazine, and I have a very special guest with me today. A lot of you probably ought to recognize him. This is none other than David A.R. White. How you doing today, sir?
I'm good. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate
Thank you
it.
for coming on today and here to talk about this new movie that you guys have out. We'll talk about that a little bit, but I do want to talk a little bit about your acting career. You've actually been acting for a while, even had the opportunity to work with the great Burt Reynolds. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, I moved to, I'm from a small town outside of Dodge City, Kansas. And went to, after high school, I went to 1 year at Moody Bible Institute. And then my entire family had graduated, and met their significant others there. So my dad was a Mennonite pastor, and so when I, called him a year later to say, "Dad, I want to leave Bible school, and I want to go to Hollywood to be an actor."
How did that go over? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It was a little bit, dicey at the time. My mom met my dad there, my brother met his wife there, my sister met her husband there.
So they're thinking you're not going to find a wife.
Yeah, exactly. So he's just going to go. He's just going to keep going. So anyway, so I went to LA at 19, and then 6 months later, I was really blessed to end up on Evening Shade with Burt Reynolds.
Wow.
And I went on there with one line, and then he ended up building a character for me for about 3.5 years. I was recurring on the show, and so yeah, everybody on that show had either won an Oscar, an Emmy, or a Tony, though. So it was an amazing experience for this Mennonite kid, from
Right.
Kansas, to be surrounded by all these Hollywood greats and really not have any idea who any of them were,
Right.
other than Burt Reynolds, because
Yeah.
I'd seen pieces of Smokey and the Bandit growing up. So
Man.
that was it.
So you just took a chance on pursuing what you felt was in your heart to do.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like, I always feel like the Lord has, gives people different gifts and dreams, and He puts them in your heart, and it's so important to listen to those dreams and to follow them. Try to teach my kids that,
Right.
today, because you never know how it'll all, turn out. But yeah, I'm fortunate and glad that I did took the chance and shot out there.
Well, we're obviously glad you did as well.
Thanks.
So you got to start there. What was the transition like from that into, I guess, Christian media?
Yeah.
How was that transition been for you?
Actually, when I was at Moody Bible Institute, I interned on 2 Christian films that were 40, they were like 35, 40-minute little shorts at the time. Everybody, in the 90s, everybody was making these short Christian films, except for Billy Graham organization.
Right.
And then they would only make a movie every 3 years, that would be a full feature,
Yeah.
an evangelistic feature. But I was fortunate to somehow, through the Bible school, they wanted the students to help out on the crew and whatnot, and so I did that, and then went to Hollywood and thinking, I was on Evening Shade and thinking, okay, I'm just doing mainstream at this point, and I got offered a role by Rich Cristiano, a little movie called Second Glance, and I was just a kid, and I did that. That again, it was like a 35, 40-minute short,
Right.
and I acted in that, and then I started getting Christian movies like throughout my 20s from different organizations, from Focus on the Family, from Concerned Women for America, from Youth for Christ. Anybody who was doing a short movie, somehow my name was in that mix of, hey, this kid's pretty good, you should use him. And then I would, I still had an audition at the point.
Right,
but,
of course.
But
yeah.
for whatever reason, I started doing them that way. And it was in my late 20s that I started producing as well.
Wow. So actor, producer, director, and screenwriter as well. So you do a lot of those.
Yeah, I'm not good at all of them, though.
No.
I think, I love the verse in Romans 12. It talks about we all have different gifts according to the measure given to each and every one of us. And it's good to try to act like, or not act like, but just try things,
Yeah.
And directing, I directed 6 movies in my career, and realized that it's so much work. I didn't really want to do it.
Right.
And then writing, I just was subpar at writing. So,
Oh man. I'm sure you're being humble
We,
here.
no, but we have, there's always better, again, getting back to that verse though, there's people who, the Lord gifts us in these different ways, and he makes them excellent at certain things, No one can be perfect at everything. You need people, and I think that's part of what producing is my dad taught me that years ago, and in the ministry, is like to connect people, and that's what producing is. A lot of it is the connection of putting the right people together who can end up making something great.
Right. Well, I think that's an awesome message to give. So you started off, like you said, with these kind of short roles in some of these films, and you.
Well, I was the lead in the movies, but they were short movies.
Short movies,
Yeah.
got you. Okay. And then you got this major movie that came out. I actually remember this movie, God's Not Dead, that you were a major character in. Played Reverend Dave.
I did, yeah.
So was that kind of taken from your actual name, David, or how did that, or is it just so happened to work out that way?
Yeah, I mean, we had produced, I think, at PureFlix was started in 2005. Myself, Michael Scott, Russell Wolfe, and then Elizabeth Travis came in a few years later. And our goal was just to, we needed a production and distribution company that could, help people who were making these type of films to get their films out there, because the mainstream studios really didn't want anything to do with the faith-based world. They didn't even think it existed. Wow. And so, I always had a heart for to help pave the way for Christian film, and that. I think the stat is like 100 million people go to church once a month, or this was pre-COVID. I don't know what it is now, but at the time, it's 100 million people. They're going to church once a month, and there's really nobody making any movies for them.
Right.
It's only Hollywood that makes their type of movies, and and a lot of them are good, but a lot of them are not good. And so that's where I just felt like there was a hole in this marketplace that Worldwide Pictures was the only one doing it at the time, and then this little company, another company, was starting to put out these end time movies. But other than that, there really was no one doing it. And so we kind of just really tried to fill that gap, and then realized that we need to put these out. And so by 2012, when we shot God's Not Dead, it was released in 2014. It was really our first theatrical, and for the most part, Christian films had not been in theaters.
Right.
Almost, like other than
non-existent,
almost non-existent, other than Billy Graham organization, every I don't know, 10, 15 years would try to put one in a theater or something like that. So it was a huge awakening for culture and Hollywood.
I remember. Like I said, it was my senior year in high school, and I remember that movie coming out. And believe it or not, the kids were talking about it. Like at school, this was a conversation.
In a mainstream school or a
Christian school? No, I was not at a Christian school. I was a public school. And it was a conversation that people were having. It started a conversation between believers and non-believers alike about our faith. And so I think the movie itself was a success financially, of course, but also in a way for a lot of young believers like me to see a movie about God and about our faith being produced in such a way that we can be proud of, and it was great to see. So I thank all of you guys that did that for that film and the series.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's an amazing. It's always humbling to me. It's so bizarre to meet people like yourself and young kids even. I mean, of all ages. Somehow God's Not Dead really struck that chord with culture. And it was interesting to I run into people all the time with their different stories of how that movie, whether they were 9 years old, whether they were 12, 18, 35, 50, 70, at the time when they saw it, how it how the Lord used that movie to impact their lives is fascinating to me. I literally am like, obviously we created the movie, obviously I'm in the movie, I produced the movie, and now we've done 4 of them. But it's still, I always feel like an outsider just kind of watching what the Lord does, how He's been orchestrating it for such a time as that.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's awesome. Well, look, you actually got another movie that I'm actually really excited to see. I watched the trailer and everything. So this movie is Nothing Is Impossible, and you actually lead and star in this movie. So give everybody a bit of a synopsis. Tell us about your character that you play, and that's kind of a pun there. But tell us about that.
Yeah, Nothing's Impossible is a movie that it was on my heart, has been on my heart for so many years. It's another one that, I feel like it's life imitating art. It was 8 years in the making. We went through so many different scripts. Tommy Blaze finally brought it home with all of these, in the writing of this script, and I love this movie. It is a movie with so much heart in it. It's about a struggling guy who missed his chance at the NBA, when he was just out of college. Everybody thought he would go. He was an incredible shooter from the outside, and he, because of that, he has basically, we pick up the story where he's lost everything. I mean, he's a janitor at a school. He doesn't even coach he ends up kind of helping the kids a little bit, but he doesn't get paid for it, so he has no money. His car's broke down. He lives with his dad, who's an alcoholic. He never had the love of his life, and so all of a sudden, this town is struggling with their NBA team, and they do an open tryout, almost like a reality show, to hopefully save the team, to see if, because they can't even afford the players that they're playing with. So it is. It's this cool thing but he doesn't really go thinking he's going to, get on this team. He's going there to meet at the time was the owner's daughter that he was always in love with. So really, it's this basketball backdrop, but it's truly a love story. Wow. And there's so many rich characters in it that, are fun to watch, from Harry Lennox to Stephen Bauer to Stella Parton, Robert Amaya, like just wonderful, wonderful cast.
Right.
And they're all broken in their ways, and they also have this dream that they never achieved. And in the process of it, it's like it's just this universal storyline about dreams.
Wow. Well, I'm excited to see the movie, and as you named, you have a great cast on board. What has it been like working with some of these folks?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Harry Lennox, of course, we've seen him on Blacklist for 10 years. I think they're at 10 years now. And then Stephen Bauer, from Scarface. I've had the privilege of working with a lot of these people before, but they're all super talented in their own way. And so we just, again, I credit my dad to this. My dad actually brought Moody Radio to Southwest Kansas that didn't have the radio stations in the 80s. And he felt like farmers needed to have a way to listen to Christian radio. And he helped, orchestrate putting together this whole group of people that ended up bringing radio to Southwest Kansas and Oklahoma and all of those places. And so I feel like in producing, it's as we talked about, it's a matter of getting the right people in the right, where they're best suited for. And when you do that, you can let them go, and they create such beauty and such wonder, And so that's what I think this movie has a lot of.
Right.
That and heart.
Yeah. Well, and you speaking of heart, somebody actually very dear to you is actually making an appearance in that movie. Your son. So what is that like, getting to work with your son on screen?
Well, my son is a really good basketball player. Actually, and so we've been training him since he was 5, and he's been in clubs since he was like 2nd grade, and and so he was on the Kenny Smith travel team for a while, and and it was wonderful in a way that. It's like your son teaches you. He was way more gifted at basketball than I am.
Yeah.
And he's way more fluid at it and everything else. And so it's just been it was wonderful. And we had our premiere on the red carpet last night in Knoxville, and to be in a movie with your any sibling is really cool. But when it's your son and sharing that we share basketball as our passion, so
that's awesome.
It was cool.
Was he ever like, Dad, that's not how you really shoot? Like, come on, like.
Well, fortunately, I had a trainer to tell me that enough. So I was taught a lot of things from Eric Snyder. He's a great trainer, and also even helped my son in the process of he reworked my son's shot. I mean, he's just if you're a basketball player out there, and I would definitely say get a really great shooting coach. And
Okay.
it's amazing to trainers evolve.
Wow. Well, okay.
They're quite knowledgeable.
Well, thank you so much for telling us about the film. So, what do you pray that the biggest takeaway is from this film?
Yeah. Well, nothing's impossible. It's about dreams. Ultimately, we make we make movies for first and foremost entertainment. But our goal, the beauty of Christian filmmaking is that you get to go deeper and that people walk away from these movies inspired, uplifted, and hopefully have a new take on whatever that is. And I always say to bring people to higher levels of insight to who God is and the purpose that He has for your life in the process. And so if people walk away from that, it's not something, we're not blowing up buildings and we're not, crashing cars into, or whatever, having aliens flown around,
Not yet.
it's, yeah, but I mean, the hope and the goal is that you look back, not only does that movie impact you at the time you watch it, but it stays with you. And the Bible talks about my word will not come back void. My word will not come back void. Jesus says that. And that's what we hope that these movies also, they even as God's Not Dead impacted you when you were younger,
Right.
that they would have an impact in the same way for years to come.